The Taijin dynasty had declared war on the human commonwealth. It was inevitable, really. They were both large power blocks. They were both interested in securing the few space lanes that existed between the spiral arms, and they were both as stubborn as a supermassive black hole. Both had constructed massive star fortresses on their side of the inter-arm corridors in order to secure the space lanes from the other, and both had warp-capable RKVs. There was little chance for a fleet to sneak by one of these behemoths. The Taijin were a proud warrior race with customs of honor, a long line of military tradition, some of the best military tech in the galaxy, and easily just as sneaky and underhanded as they were honorable. The human commonwealth was a collection of various governmental systems in what can only be described as a chaotic and disorganized mess, even though they were each comparable in terms of military capability, and both had rules governing war for the same reasons. The human commonwealth would be just another thorn in the side of the Taijin's ever-expanding empire. Soon the declaration of war was sent. The Taijin waited for a reply. None came. They waited longer. None came. Finally, after 3 whole years without any reply, they sent out a flotilla, led by a high admiral, to the nearest human world to talk to the ambassador. It would not be a short flight, easily taking 2 months to complete the transit between the disputed corridor. The flotilla warped to the colony of Uedak Raslanar Krugog and attempted to speak with the ambassador, only to find their universal translators spouting out garbled nonsense. Some of it seemed to be bastardized Kalari and Taijin words, but it was hard to tell underneath all the illegible chicken scratch. After 4 human weeks of trying to get the translators to work, the High Admiral had enough and went to the next closest human world. The flotilla arrived over the world of Second Lacanpuri and attempted to speak with the ambassador, only for the translators to be met with the same garbled nonsense. Only this time it was worse than before, with large sections of the conversation being marked as unintelligible. The only sections that were intelligible were badly mispronounced Taijin, Kalari, and Roxo. The High Admiral waited for 8 weeks, as the technicians, linguists, and engineers attempted to make sense of the translators. Once again, the translators failed, and the flotilla moved on. The flotilla warped to another human world known as New Appalachia to hopefully get some semblance of sense from the translators. They were pleasantly surprised when the translators did seem to work, but the ambassador would not stop talking about footwear, water flow control devices, and the High Admiral's marital situation. Rather than conclude that the ambassador was attempting to dishonor him, the High Admiral soon surmised that the translators were, again, mistranslating. They wasted nearly 12 weeks as they tried and failed to get the translators to translate properly before warping away to another world. He'd never heard of distant lignin-based plant as an object before, and what was a substir? Was it a new weapon? They gave up and warped for another 2 weeks to a more populated world, New Ottawa, where finally their translators worked, and they sent a missive to the local ambassadorial station. Soon a shuttle was dispatched to the Taijin flagship. Ambassador of the Human Commonwealth, I am here to ask what happened to our declaration of war, the High Admiral said as the human ambassador stepped aboard the mighty Taijin vessel. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. We're still in the middle of translating, and I'm sorry processing it before we distribute it to the various nations within the Commonwealth. I apologize that we've been making rather slow progress, but we've managed to translate it a-boot 1% of the way into our most commonly used language. I'm sorry, but we need more time to translate it into other languages, and then we need to account for various dialects. Sorry, the ambassador apologized. We deliberately made sure it would be easy to translate into your trade-speak English. How is it not translated yet? The High Admiral questioned. Well, the human commonwealth uses a mixture of the consensus and democratic systems, so all systems need to be able to read the declaration, and the majority of residents need to sign off on it for the declaration, and rules of war to be in effect. While English is the taste sensory organ of the Frankish ethnic group, which isn't even an English term of the Commonwealth, there are many dialects that at this point are wholly unintelligible from each other. They aren't separate languages per se, and the pronunciations and spellings are common enough anyone can understand. But the accents are often quite thick, and there is almost no formal structure, so it can give difficulty to computer translators. Some spellings have different meanings in different members of the Commonwealth, so we have to account for that too. Furthermore, new words are being added by the second. The ambassador replied, "And when can we expect to see a response?" The High Admiral said, incensed, "I'm sorry, but some 200 years from now, but we'll have to account for linguistic drift, so 500 years from now would be my best estimate, though we would have to go through the signing procedure again, so perhaps 700 years," the ambassador apologized. The High Admiral furrowed his brow before slamming his head into the bulkhead. "I believe you can apply for a war permit directly for the territories that you wish to invade with the local government there. If it's regarding the disputed systems along the inter-armed space lanes, that will have to be handled by the Commonwealth Council, and you'll need to seek out a higher member of the ambassadorial services. I can put in a request for you if you wish, however it may take a while." "Terribly sorry," the ambassador said. "Ambassador, may I ask a question?" the High Admiral said. "Please go ahead," the ambassador replied. "What languages were the colonies I previously visited speaking?" the High Admiral asked. "It appears you encountered different dialects of English while you were trying to find a suitable ambassadorial station. Sorry about that, there are usually several per planet, and the most intelligible are chosen as ambassadors," the ambassador replied. "Fuck!" the High Admiral shouted in English before switching back to Taijin. "Is your trade speak just looted grammar and vocabulary?" "More or less," the ambassador replied. "Shall I send a missive to the Taijin dynasty?" "It will. Extinct feathered reptile-like creature. It's way there faster than your flotilla." "It's all right, Ambassador. I will report this information to His Imperial Majesty myself," the High Admiral said as he rubbed his temples. "It took 4 months to get back to Taijin space. The great flotilla, commanded by the High Admiral, little more than a parade through the human systems and the inter-arm corridor. When the flotilla arrived at the Taijin throne world, the High Admiral was summoned before the court. "High Admiral, what has happened to our declaration of war?" the Taijin Emperor asked. "Your Grace, it is currently in processing and we will receive a reply in anywhere between 200 to 700 years, the High Admiral replied. "However, I do not believe we should invade the humans, but continue our quarantine of them." "Why is that so, High Admiral?" the Emperor asked. "Their bureaucracy is a nightmare, and their language not only defies logic, but it's also infectious. I believe it best we stay away from the linguistic and psychological abomination that is their trade speak, lest we ourselves become barbarians," the High Admiral replied. "It is a wonder that they ever achieved spaceflight." "Fuck!" the Emperor swore in English.